Okay, so we have this situation that M1 and M2 are contact to each other, and the table is frictionless. So we are not discussing about the friction, but we are giving a force to M1 so that the particle will move to the left side. So already I told about that we will discuss the force that is acting on M1. That means the force that are given to M1, not given by M1. Okay, so what will be the FBD for M1? What will be the P for M1? So remember that the M1 we are giving the force to M1, and then M1 giving a force to M2, but this force is not given to M2. This force is given to M1, and the partial of this force is given to M2. So that means M1 is given to M2, that force is F12. So this is the force given M1 to M2, and F21 is the force that is given M2 to M1. Okay, so this is 2 and this is by. So what is F12? So F12 is the force given by M1 to M2, and F21 is the force given by M2 to M1, right? So you clear about F12 and F21, and we have F12 equal to minus F21, right? But remember, the magnitude both are same. Why I have given one negative sign? Because the negative sign is represent the Newton's third law. That means every action there is an opposite and equal reaction. अगर M1 M2 को कुछ फोर्स दे रहा है, उसका मतलब M2 भी M1 को कुछ फोर्स दे रहा है, और दोनों फोर्स सेम है लेकिन डायरेक्शन अलग है. अगर ये इस डायरेक्शन से इसको दे रहा है, so M2 will given to M1 in the left direction. If M1 given M2 to right, then M2 will be given to M1 in left direction, right? So what is the free body diagram for M1? So for M1, what is the case? That means this is M1, right? And we are discussing what are the force given to M1, given to, not given by M1. Okay, we will discover, we will live about the force that is given by M1, but we will consider that forces that is given to M1, right? So M2 is giving a force to M1, that is our F21, right? That means if you are kicking to your friend, that you are close to with your friend, that means you and your friend are standing close to each other. If you give a kick to your friend, then your friend also give some force. That means some external force to you also. That means if we kick the wall, then wall also giving a force to us. That's why our hand feeling some pain. So that means every action there is an opposite and equal reaction. So the F12 force is in direction and F21 force is in direction. So we are taking the FBD of M1. So F21 is in the left direction and the particle is moving in the right direction. So there will be pseudo force, right? So which is equal to M1F, and we are giving a force F to M1. So look that F is only the force that is acting to the right side, and F21 and the pseudo force are the two forces acting to the left side. So what will be the FBD? That means F21 plus F3 equal to F, right? So this is the FBD for M1. Now FBD for M2, what will be given? For M2 particle, that is, there is an M2 particle, and remember the F is given to M1 and partial of the F is given to the M2 through M1. M1 के जरिए में इसका कुछ फोर्स M2 को दिया जा रहा है, ठीक है? So what is that force? That force is nothing but F12. Okay, so this is F12 and the particle is moving in this direction. So there will be pseudo force, that is Fp, and that is equal to M2. So what is the free body diagram says? F12 equal to Fp, right? So F12 is nothing but M2A. This is equation 1, this is equation 2. So what we get from 1 and 2? So I am erasing this part. So what we obtain, that we have F12 magnitude equal to F21. Why I have written magnitude? Because the direction already specified. Important this part. So mark this part. I know that F12 equal to minus F21, correct? So F12 equal to minus F21, right? But I cannot put that F12 as minus F21 because we are already discussed about the direction. I have already mentioned the direction. That's why this negative sign is due to direction only. Otherwise, F12 equal to F21, right? So F12 equal to F21. Now substitute 2 in equation 1. Substitute 2 in 1. Okay. Substitute 2 in 1. So what will be happen? Your F12 equal to F21. I am again repeating, F12 is negative F21, but that negative sign is due to direction. So I have already specified the direction. So remove about the negative sign. Now go to the positive sign, and F12 is equal to F21. Okay. So that means substitute 2 in equation 1 using this one. So your F12 equal to F21. That means M2A plus FP is nothing but F. So what is FP? So FP is your pseudo force due to first particle, that is M1A. So M1A equal to F. So what is the acceleration? This is nothing but F by M1 plus M2, right? So if we are giving a force to the M1 object, so there are two objects, M1 and M2. If we are giving a force to the M1 object, then it will move with an acceleration. So what is the expression of the acceleration? The acceleration equal to F by M1 plus M2. So this is the question about the two bodies are in contact. Okay, so remember, so this is the important thing, that F12 equal to minus F1. Is this correct? But the minus sign is due to direction only. Okay, so when we are writing the magnitude, M1A, M2A, these are magnitude. So we have to substitute the positive value, right? Okay, so remember this. And I am telling one more thing, that so if here also you can calculate what is F12 value. You substitute the acceleration in the second equation, you will get F12 and F21, right? So again I am repeating one more case, that if 3 objects are there, that means M1, M2, then another object M3 is there, and we are giving a force. So remember, you do the free body diagram for this 3 particles, and you will obtain that your acceleration here also be F divided by M1 plus M2 plus M3. What we discussed in the previous question, that there are 2 mass, M1 and M2, but here there are 3 mass, and we are giving a force to the M1 mass. Then these all 3 particles will move in the same acceleration. Remember, all particles will move in the same acceleration if there is no friction. Okay, so what is the acceleration? F equal to, we got in the previous example, F by M1 plus M2, but here will be F by M1 plus M2 plus M3. So if there are n number of particles, that means your M3, then M4, then M5, then M6, these are n number of particles, and if you are giving a force that is comparatively high to their restrict force, then your acceleration also, that will be Mn. Okay, so this is the general case for n number of particles. If there are n number of mass, for n number of mass, what will be the acceleration? So remember, the acceleration will be F by M1 plus M2 plus M3 plus Mn. Then we will go to the next example, that is the next important thing. That also similar to this case, but they are not contact to each other, right? So they are not contact to each other. We will discuss that part. Okay, so remember, there is important also how to find the F12 and the F21, that we in the previous example we also discussed. So I am discussing this is the 4th part of FBD. The 4th part is that. So that means your example 4. So this is another question. So look to the question how it is given. Then we have 2 objects. Okay, this is M1 and this is M2. Right. Now they are connected through a string. They are connected through a string or any wire. So this is a string or wire. String or wire. And these two masses are pulled by some force F. So what is the question? So find out. So this is a table that is frictionless. Remember, there is no friction. Frictionless. There is no friction. And so I think you understand the question. So the question is, what is the acceleration? And this is a spring, so it has some tension. So what is the tension? These are the two questions, right? So M1 mass is there and M2 mass is there. Both are connected through a wire. So the wire have some tension, because this is an example of a string. And another one is the force. The force is connected to M2, right? The force is connected to M2. That means the force is pulled to both objects, but the F is directly connected to M2, not directly connected to M1. So M2 will give also some force to M1. That is the tension force. Okay. So remember, there is no friction. So we have also we will not discuss about the weight and normal also. So there will be two force only. That is the pseudo force and your tension force. Correct. So this is the acceleration direction, because we are pulling M1 and M2 to the right side. So the acceleration will be to the right side. Okay, so take the FBD of M1. Again, the FBD of M1. So remember, we are discussing about M1. So we are discussing about M1. So what are the force acting to M1? So there is a tension force. Remember, M2 is pulling to M1, right? M2 is pulling to M1. So there is some force. That means M2 जो M1 को खींच रहा है वो कुछ फोर्स से खींच रहा है, मतलब जो टेंशन है वो स्ट्रिंग से आउटवर्ड होगा. So this is the T direction, right? So this is the T direction for M1. Or every action there is an opposite and equal reaction also. We are pulling to M2, but M2 is connected to M1. So M2 also pulling to M1 by a force, that is tension. And when M2 is pulling to M1, M1 also pulling to M2 towards it. Because अगर तुमने so discuss about this case, that there is a small object and there is a large object. That means, so when we are pulling to the small object, we will give little force. But when we are pulling to the large object, we have to give a large force. That means that object also have some force, that if we are pulling to the object, then the object also pulling to us, because every action there is an opposite and equal reaction. So that means if M2 is pulling to M1, M1 also pulling to M2. So remember, your F should be greater than T. Okay. So remember, your F should be greater than T. Otherwise, we cannot pull to M2 and M1. So remember this case, that we are pulling to M1. So F should be greater than T. So okay. So this is the FBD. So M1 also pulling to M2. But our physics said that when we are doing the FBD, don't discuss the force which are given by M1. Okay. Discuss that force that are given to M1, not given by M1. So M2 also, M2 pulling to M1 by a tension force, that is T. Okay. So this is the acceleration direction. So that will be the pseudo force. So this is your pseudo force, right? So what is the FBD? T equal to FP. That means T equal to, what is the pseudo force? M1. Okay. So when we will discuss to your second object, that is your M2. So what's happening in M2 case? What's happening in M2 case? So in M2 case, there is a force and there is acceleration. So there will be pseudo force, right? And then remember one more thing. M2 is pulling to M1. So M2 also giving to some force M1, that we discuss in the M1 case, because we are discussing what are the force acting to M2, not given by M2, right? So अगर M2 M1 को खींच रहा है, उसका मतलब M1 का भी कुछ इंटरनल फोर्स है जो इसको रुकेगा खींचने के लिए. So what is that force? That is the tension force, right? So there will be another force. So this is your FP. There is another force, that is your tension force. Okay, so the tension force will be to the left side, because M1 also giving some force to M2 to stop to pulling, right? अगर आपको कोई खींच रहा है तो आपका कुछ इंटरनल फोर्स है जो उसका जो खींच रहा है उससे कम है, मतलब थोड़ा सा कम है, इसलिए तो F greater than T है, ठीक है. So what will happen? So this is the M2 case. So the tension will be towards M1. We are not discussing what are force acting by the M2. We are discussing the forces which are acting to M2, right? Okay. So what is the FBD? So that means T plus FP equal to F. That means F equal to T plus M2. Okay, so this is the first equation, that is the first FBD of M1, and this is the second equation. So what do you obtain from first and second equation? What you obtain from first and second equation? So substitute 1 in 2, you will obtain what you will obtain? Now your acceleration equal to F by M1 plus M2. So look to the previous case and this example, that is the third case we have discussed. When two bodies are contact to each other and we are giving a force, then there also acceleration F by M1 plus M2. Here also the acceleration F by M1 plus M2. There are internal forces that F12 and F21 we have discussed previously. But here in this case, the internal force is your tension, that is acting through the string. So string have no force actually, because these are connected to M1. So this is the force, that is the internal force. This is your tension. Okay. So if you not understand, then please comment. Then we will find out then what is the T value. This is also important. What will be the T value? Right. So the acceleration we get. What we get? The acceleration. We obtain the acceleration. So acceleration is nothing but F by M1 plus M2. Right. So if we okay, from equation 1, what is equation 1 says? So T equal to M1A. Therefore your T equal to M1 divided by M1 plus M2 into F. So remember, M1 will be given to us, M2 also be given to us, and F is the force that is pulled by you, so that also given to you. So then you can find out the acceleration and the tension, right? So these are the two questions of this FBD of fourth part. So okay, now we will consider now what is happening if there are three objects. What will happen? This is M1 and this is pulling by M2, again this is pulling by M3. So what will happen? Remember, this string is connected to M1 and M2, right? This string is connected to M1 and M2. So what is the tension? T1. And this string is connected to M2 and M3. So the tension is T2. And remember, the table is frictionless. Okay, so this is frictionless table. So, but the case is different, that there are three objects, M1, M2, M3, and the strings are object. This is not string, right? So this is first wire, and this is the second wire. This is the force. Okay, so these are the wire 2, and this is wire 1. Okay. So, so the wire 1 has tension T1 and wire 2 has tension 2. So what is F? So this is the force pulling the three objects. Force pulling the three objects. Right. Then what will be the acceleration here? All three particles will move into the A. So remember, since the table is frictionless, so acceleration upon 1, acceleration upon 2, acceleration upon 3, that will be similar. So because they are connected to a string, and that means three objects are connected to a string and you are pulling the three objects, right? So what will be the acceleration here? So you do the free body diagram. So you will get what will be the FBD for M1. If you will do the FBD for M1, you will obtain that T1 equal to M1A. Then if you will do the FBD for M2, what will happen? FBD for M2. Remember, M2 is pulling by M3 and M2 also pulling by M1. I am discussing here. Okay. So 3 objects there. So what will be in the case of M2? So remember, this is M2, right? So M2. So what are the force? Acting to M2? M2 के ऊपर कौन सा फोर्स गिर रहा है, मतलब कौन सा फोर्स एक्ट कर रहा है, मतलब M2 कितना फोर्स किसी को दे रहा है, ये हमारा कोई मतलब नहीं है. M2 के ऊपर कितना फोर्स गिर रहा है, ये मतलब है. So remember, there is M1 also pulling and M3 also pulling. So this is T2, T1 and T2. Remember, M3 is connected to M2 and M1 also connected to M2. So there will be 2 tension force and it is moving to in this direction. So that will be the pseudo force. So what is the FBD for M2 now? So the FBD becomes T2 equal to T1 plus M2A, correct? Because the pseudo force is M2A. So this is F equal to M2A. Now what will be happen to M3 case? So in the M3 case, the force is pulling by you. Again, the acceleration is there. So there will be pseudo force. So the FP, that is your M3A, right? And again, the M3 is connected to M2 by the tension T2, correct? So M3 is connected to M2, right? So the tension will be there, that is T2, okay? So what for the FBD for M3, what will be happen? Okay, so for M3, FBD for M3, what will be happen? That your F equal to T2 plus M3A, right? So T2 equal to T1 plus M2A. What is T1? M1A. So that is A into M1 plus M2, right? Then what is it? F कितना है? So F ये हो जाएगा, यहाँ से T2 को सब्स्टिट्यूट कर दीजिए, यहाँ हमें T2 मिल गया है, so T2 को यहाँ सब्स्टिट्यूट कर दीजिए. So if you substitute T2 here, so that will become A into M1 plus M2 plus M3, right? So what is the acceleration we obtain in this case? What is the acceleration we obtain? So that means F by M1 plus M2 plus M3. When we discuss the 2 mass object, that means M1 and M2, we obtain acceleration equal to F by M1 plus M2. But when we discuss 3 objects, that is F by M1 plus M2 plus M3. So now you will find T1. What is T1? T1 equal to M1A. So that means M1 divided by M1 plus M2 plus M3 into F. Then what will be of T2? T2 is nothing but M1 plus M2 into A. So that is M1 plus M2 divided by M1 plus M2 plus M3. So these are the tension for this triple massive FBD. So this is the important thing, and this is also similar to the third example. That means when 3 objects are contact to each other, in that case there will be the internal force F12, F21, then F13, then F23, then F32. So these are the triple cases. So they both are same case, but here the internal energy or tension, right? So what is the general formula? So there is a general formula. If we अगर n particle connected to in a series to different strings, so what is the case? The case is that means we have M1, then this is connected to a string, that is M2, then this is connected to a string. So ऐसे क्या कितना जाएगा? So जो Mn, so n number of mass objects are connected. Okay, so they all are sitting on a frictionless table. So this is frictionless table, and all are the Mn is pulling by the F force. So n mass object are pulled by F. Okay, by force F. So M1, M2, M3, and N number of mass connected to. So that means the T tension will be T1, there will be T2, then M3, then M4, then M5, then in connected. Then last one will be Tn minus 1, right? Tn minus 1. So what will be the acceleration? Acceleration will be F by M1 plus m2 dot 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 m. So this is the acceleration. So what will be t1? T1 will be m1 divided by m1 plus m2 plus mn into m. Right. So what will be t2? T2 is nothing but m1 plus m2 plus dot dot dot. Okay, so m1 plus m2 divided by m1 plus m2 plus dot dot mn. Right. So this is your T2. So in this case, you can find out the Tn minus 1 also. So what will be Tn minus 1? That will be m1 plus m2 plus dot 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 mn minus 1 divided by m1 plus m2 plus dot dot mn into m. So look to the second 2 mass case. So this is the same, f by m1 plus m2. In the 3 mass case, m1 by m1 plus m2 plus m3. So this is the general case. If n number of mass connected, then add the all masses and divided by f. Okay, so f divided by m1 plus m2 plus dot dot mn, that will give your acceleration. So t1 kitna hoga? m1 divided by n number of mass added, then multiply with force. Then this is T2, m1 plus. But what is T1? What is T1? This is the tension connected to m1 and m2. Remember, this is the tension connected to m1 and m2. What is T2? So T2 is the tension connected to m2 and m3. Right? So here m3 is there. Right? So here m3 is there. So T2 is connected to m2 and m3. Similarly, what is Tn minus 1? So Tn minus 1 is the tension connected to m1 and mn. So this is the tension between what? mn and mn minus 1. So this is the tension. Okay. So remember, what is the acceleration? Acceleration is the same, but the tension are different. So T1 is connected to m1, m2. T2 is connected to m2, m3. That is Tn minus 1. Tn minus 1 is connected to mn minus 1 and mn. So this is the acceleration and tension if n objects are connected through different string. Right? Okay. So this is all about your FBD. And if you want to know more about, then please comment. We'll discuss more about the FBD. That is inclined surface also there, so that will be also different.